Hey, it's Peter from Rock Daydream Nation, and today we're going to do the top five Inxs songs. And I've got Tim Durling in the hot seat again. How are you, Tim?
Doing really good, Peter. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to rank the top five Inxs songs from five to one, and maybe a few honorable mentions. So hit us with your number five.
This is going to be a lot of fun, Peter, because INXS are a band I've always liked. They've never been one of my favorites, but I've always liked them. And I'm curious for you. I mean, being Australian, were you into these guys right from the get-go?
Yes. I grew up with them on a lot of the music shows of the day. There were shows like called Countdown, which were like a MTV clip
Yeah.
show. And I had a very high awareness, basically from their first single onwards. They started off as a very punkish new wave, and then they merged into something which was more of a stadium rock, pop rock, funk pub band. So yeah, be interested to see what your choices
I
are.
think the first thing I ever heard by INXS was "What You Need." So that's
Okay.
that's kind of when they came on
Yep.
North America's radar. But I know
Absolutely.
they always did really really good here in Canada.
Yeah.
So, which speaking of Canada, my number five, I'm interested to get your take on this, is Pretty Vegas from the Switch album.
Right.
And of course, this was their one album they did with JD Fortune, who is from the next province over from me in Nova Scotia. And of course, it was the NXS rock star. But I thought he did a really good job. I'm sorry that it didn't work out. I'm not sure. There's depending on who you ask, it's whatever happened. But Pretty Vegas was a fantastic song. It got them on the charts again, and I just thought it sounded like classic in excess to me. And I mean, I know there's people that like, without Michael Hutchence, it's not in excess, but um, I kind of this album to me isn't. Not every song is that good in my opinion, but Pretty Vegas ranks like I never get tired of that one. So wanted to put that one at my number five.
Yeah, it had a little bit of swagger, that song. It think it went top 10 in Australia, but then nothing. Um, there's been the ongoing issue after Hutchins. There's been quite a few singers that have had the INXS gig. Terence Trent D'Arby did the gig opening up a stadium, which was an inspired choice because he had that beautiful rock soul voice. Then we had John Stevens of a band called Noiseworks. He also was lead singer of Dead Daisies. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. And then JD Fortune out of that show. Look, I have got mixed feelings about that whole concept and the rock star in excess, but that is a decent song, and I could imagine Hutchins easily singing it. It's
Oh
got a
yeah,
fair amount of swagger. Yeah,
yeah.
that's an interesting choice and a surprising one. Good stuff. My number five is a song called The Gift. So it's from the look, I've got the greatest hits. It's actually off the Full Moon Dirty Hearts album, which I just can't locate. It's somewhere in my collection. I found that the albums after Kick were quite mixed. Not all of the albums were successful. There was a lot of filler, but there was at least three or four very decent songs on each album. And The Gift is sort of like a industrial sound. Hutchins has got voices through different sort of effects. It's got a beautiful keyboard wash from Andrew Farris, sorry, and yeah, I like it. So that's my number five pick, the Gift.
Definitely more on that album later. And yeah, it's gonna become really obvious here that it's not that I'm a novice fan, but a lot of the songs I am picking are singles. But in a lot of cases, there's a reason they're singles, is because they're the best songs they have. And keeping with that, I'm going to go all the way back, I think, to one of the earliest In Excess singles from their debut album from 1980, a song that always puts me in a good mood. I just love it. Just Keep Walking. Um, you mentioned, the pub rock, sort of the punkish new wave. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of attitude in this song, and I just always really liked this song. I get a kick out of the video. The video I find quite amusing because they're playing in this tiny little room, and then at the end the camera pans back and they're in the middle of a street, but they've just got this curtained in room, and they're so young. They're so young when you watch that video. But yeah, now the first album I think is kind of spot. It's a first album, right? But for a first album, it's not bad. I mean,
It's good.
pretty professional sounding when you consider these were just young guys. But
Yeah.
Just Keep Walking is by far my favorite song off the first album. And I thought
that's a killer track. And you can see in that video that he's definitely channeling part Jim Morrison, part Mick Jagger. He's got that swagger, even, very so young in that video. That's a really, really good choice. Well done. My number 4 is Taste It off the Welcome to Wherever You Are album. This song is like sex on a stick. You've got Hutchins just crooning all over the vocals. You've got that slow build up, a little bit of harmonica. There's a lot of drama in it. The film clip was very racy. I think it got banned off MTV. I don't know if it made it into Canada, but it's a very sort of a racy type of video. But the song itself is a lot of melodrama, a lot of build up, and it really goes in that sort of that funk genre that they were exploring post-Kick. It's probably not too far away stylistically from Suicide Blonde and a lot of those other songs, like the funky type of guitar. But anyway, I like it a lot. I think it's pretty sexy and tasty, and Taste It is my number 4.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Not too long ago, on my channel, my wife Sarah and I sat and listed our top 10 singles from 1992, and Taste It was one of my choices. That's one of my favorites from Welcome to Wherever You Are. And the video did get some play on Much Music, which is our MTV here, but I don't know if it was an edited version, but I do remember it's such a cool song.
Yeah.
Like you said, lots of attitude, lots of swagger.
But the album itself, that was probably the beginning of the commercial slide in America. You could see, I was just looking at the chart placings of their album, and incrementally, and I know we've discussed this in a previous show, how can you follow up Kick, which sold near of 6 to 7 million, and you can see the X did less, did 3 or 4 million, and incrementally it did less and less. And Welcome to Wherever You Are, I think that was really definitely the beginning of the slide. But on the UK side, it went to number 1. So when the fortunes in America went down, their fortunes in the UK for a number of years went up, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It only went gold in the US, and it was their first album since Listen Like Thieves. All of their albums went platinum or multi-platinum. I think even Live Baby Live, or however you say that, the live album went platinum in the States. And actually, I think eventually The Swing might have gone gold, and maybe Shabu Shabab, but I mean, they sold a lot of records in the States. But yeah, I think that Welcome to Wherever You Are was the last one to certify in the States. And I just mentioned the album. My number 3 is a song I've always loved. It was a single, but at least on this side of the Atlantic, it wasn't a huge hit from this album. I don't have a lot of Inxs vinyl, but from Listen Like Thieves, Kiss the Dirt, Falling Down the Mountain.
Great song.
Just love it. I love the mix of acoustic and electric, and the video's so cool. They're in the desert, and my understanding is that they flew to Australia to film that video. They're on tour in the States, and they flew right back. Like, it must have cost a small fortune to do that. But this is a band that was on the rise. MTV said we need a video, so. But yeah, it manages to be have that Inxs swagger, that Michael Hutchins swagger, and a little bit of that rock attitude, especially in the middle, where it kind of gets a little bit more forceful. And yet the verses are the whole song, really, it's very melancholy. It's got a lot of it's got a melancholy feel to it. I don't know if it's minor chords or what it is, but it's always been a favorite of mine, and it's one that I was always surprised that more people didn't get into it, because it was so catchy. It would get in my head all the time.
Absolutely. That's probably my favorite Inxs album. I think I'll be so bold to say I think it's their best album, and I'll talk more about that later. But that was the one that really had the bit of a commercial impact in the States.
Big
I think
time.
it got to number 11.
Yeah.
And What You Need, that was their first top 10
That hit,
single.
I think that hit number 5. That was a
Number
big, yeah,
5.
that was their big
Yeah,
moment.
the big kahuna. But in regards to that song, I love the video, and I'm sort of visualizing it where he's kicking up the dirt, and it's just this cloud of dust. It's just really effective. I think it was filmed in the middle of some remote desert in South Australia that there was just nobody around. They were literally helicoptered in and helicoptered out. That's rock star video time, isn't
Yeah.
it?
You can see
That you
the
can do
sun
that.
going down, like, they were
Yeah.
losing their light, obviously, right? But it
Oh,
worked.
I love those 80s videos, Tim. They were
Yeah.
like little mini movies, weren't they?
And you know what? NXS made really good video. Like their videos have held up really, really well. Like especially once they, once you get to, really all of their videos were pretty cool, right from the beginning. But especially once you get into the videos from the swing, like um, um, Melting in the Sun and Burn for You. Like they made really classy videos.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's a great choice. Right. For my number 3, I'm going to go off the Shaboo Shabar album and pick their anthem, Don't Change. So in that era, you had a lot of rock anthems. You had your U2s and your Simple Minds or Big Country. A lot of the sort of big anthem type of rock songs, and I think this really is right up there. It's a bit of a showstopper. It's a very inspiring type of song. I like the build up. I like the melody. So Shaboo Shabar was probably the album that broke in America. It hit the lower reaches of the top 40, but I used to read a lot of American Rolling Stone magazines, and I'd always go to the back charts and look, just curious to see what Australian acts had broken through. And I saw that Shaboo Shabar was, in the college. They used to print, I don't know if you remember, Tim, the top 10 college
Yeah.
albums.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was bands like The Church and Inxs and a lot of the Aussie bands. You sort of,
Midnight
they
Oil.
would be populating it. And I started to see that this album hit the lower reaches.
Yeah. I
And
think it hit 46.
yeah. And I understand off the back of this album, they toured the States supporting Adamant. So that would have been an interesting tour, and started just doing the colleges and starting to get a little bit of a following. But I really like that song. It's a bit of an anthem. It gets played on Aussie radio to this day, a lot on the classic radio. I don't know if it gets played much over there, but I think it's a really solid and, sort of anthem type song. And that's my number 3.
That was definitely there. Shaboo Shabar was the first album to be released internationally once they signed with Atlantic, and I think in 1984 the first 2 were issued in North America on Atlantic.
Yeah.
I mean that was they appeared on the US Festival in 1983. I think they also opened for Men at Work. And yeah, that was really, like, I think a lot of people thought they were a brand new band, but it was actually, I mean, they were quite new, but it was their 3rd album. So next is kind of an odd one. My good friend Matt Phillips, who helped design my Unspooled book. We've been friends for a long, long time. Inxs is his favorite band, and I'm kind of trying to think, what would Matt think of my choice here, because he's such a big fan. But he's kind of amused by the fact that I have said, the Inxs album that I've been listening to the most for the last probably couple of years is this one, Full Moon Dirty Hearts. Now, this album came out in late 1993, and it was not successful for a long time after that. You'd see it in the delete bins. You'd see it with the corners cut out of them. But I think this is a fantastic album. I love every song on this. I know that that's not typically a favorite NXS album, but I can listen to this album from start to finish. And you mentioned The Gift. The Gift is a fantastic song. This is actually the one time I'm going to mention the song that I don't think was a single. I think it's just an album track, and it's the 3rd song on here called Make Your Peace. Really, really, really like that song. And I love the story behind this album, the making of this album. So they didn't tour Welcome to Wherever You Are. They went straight in and to write another album, and they ended up recording this on some remote island somewhere
Yeah.
Also, the sidebar to that story, sadly, is when Michael was injured and lost his sense of taste, and he was probably never quite the same after that. But yeah, they came up with a really kind of tough sounding album. You listen to songs like Days of Rust and Time and The Messenger and I love the last song, Viking Juice, to the end of rock and roll. I love that one too. But yeah, Make Your Peace. That just gets my head nodding, and a big fan of this album, and that's my choice for number 2 is Make Your Peace.
Yeah, I think it's the Deep Cuts album. I think that if we were doing an in-depth review of Inxs, that album has definitely got a lot of deep cuts and a lot of cameos, or not cameos, but a lot of
Yeah, like Ray
collaborations.
Charles and Chrissy Hynde. Yeah.
Yeah, the Ray Charles duet got flogged on Australian radio around that time. That was the song that really got really pushed. But yeah, that song itself probably doesn't, it's not, I like the Chrissy Hynde one, the Full Moon Dirty Heart, but the Ray Charles to me sounded a little bit contrived. But the rest of that album, it's really decent and extremely underrated. And as you said, it just didn't do that well.
Did any of the singles from this album do well in Australia?
No.
No.
The Gift reached number 26. The album itself, I think, went top 10, maybe top 5, but none of the singles charted. But this was in a time where the musical movement had changed, and they had probably moved on from Inxs. You had Britpop, you had electronica. Basically, it was a different generation that had moved on from that sort of pub rock or that funk rock.
Over here we had grunge
and grunge as well.
And surprisingly enough, a lot of country music. A lot of people my age started listening. That was the strangest thing. I remember people my age buying country albums. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Just me personally. But yeah, and it's a shame because through that all, I think they put out a really decent album. They did videos for every song on it, which was kind of cool. That was a different, you didn't see much. It didn't always happen, but yeah.
But yeah, I think, just people had moved on, but it's definitely worth investigating, and it's got lots of great deep cuts on that one. So yeah, that's a really good choice. Rightio, for my number 2, I'm going a little bit conventional. I'm going to go the big one, Kick, and Need You Tonight. A good song's a good song, and it's a great song. And it's a simple song, and you listen to the construction, but gee whiz, all the parts that make a whole, it's just so well put together. All the little intricate guitar bits, the synth bits, you got Hutchins just crooning over it, and it's just fairy dust. It just went to number 1. It was a huge hit all around the world, and it basically kickstarted the album. I love it. It's got a lot of funk. In the nightclubs in the day, it was a definite, people would just get off their seats and just get on the dance floor and dance to it. And the legend was born. And I think, this was probably commercially, definitely Inxs were at their peak, where you had Hutchins was just the sort of the sex symbol superstar frontman. And you can see his charisma through that, just seeping through that video. But I think it's just a great song, and the Kick album's got a lot of that haven't made my top 5. Like Devil Inside, Never Tear Us Apart. It's such a great album, but that's my number 2.
Yeah, I mean, that was their moment, and it's crazy to think that Atlantic Records they didn't want that album. They thought it was too R&B. This will never get played on the radio. And, their biggest career making songs all came off of Kick. It's just crazy. Sometimes record companies just don't always have it together. That's one thing it's funny how it worked out with my song lists. There's actually nothing from Kick and there's nothing from X. And I like both of those albums, obviously. It's just the songs that I was thinking of, none of them came from those albums, but they're both great albums. So now it's time for my number 1. It's one you've already mentioned, and it is from Shabooh Shoobah, and it is Don't Change. I love this song. this is such a killer song. I love the little synth line at the beginning of it, but when the guitar kicks in, it's just such a cool song. Only went to number 80 in the US, like 80. That's crazy to me. The one thing was the breakthrough top 40 single. It went to number 30, and it's a great song too. But Don't Change. I mean, like you said, it's an anthemic. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did they not close? They usually closed their shows with this song.
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of makes sense because it's kind of a definitive statement. It's like, good night. There's nothing more we can do. Hope you had a good time. And one thing that I do like as well, I think that I don't know how many years ago it was, but if you go on YouTube, I mean, most people watching this, you'd be familiar with the Don't Change video. They come backing in on a truck. They get off the truck. John Ferris has already got his drum set up, and then they just kind of go into it. They're in this like garage or whatever. But a bunch of people got together, a bunch of guys got together and recreated that video shot for shot. It was kind of a nice little tribute to it. But
I'll definitely check that out. Yeah.
Not a song that I remember hearing get much radio play. And when I did hear it, it was like, why? This is fantastic. So yeah, this is one case where North America really missed the mark on a great song. And it's so catchy. Yeah, that's my number one Inxs song right there.
You know who I think's really underrated in that band? Well, he's the principal songwriter. So you've got Hutchins, who does the lyrics, and Andrew Farris, who does the the compositions, the music side.
Yeah.
I love his keyboard washes. Yeah. Some of them are just really basic synth lines, but they're just so haunting. And that synth line in that song just underpins everything else with the crunching guitars. I just think it's a magnificent anthem song, and well done.
He's really good at picking the right synth tones too. For the he has some synthesizer and keyboard sounds from the '80s sound kind of dated today, but Inxs don't really have any of those. He was always smart enough to find something that really served the song. And you're right. I mean, that ominous, not ominous, but just that little thing.
It's
absolutely. Very simple. But then in the chorus, in between, don't change a thing for me. Like, it's ear candy, right? It keeps something exciting going in the headphones the whole time. But
no, I reckon you two must have heard that and gone, damn it, we would have loved to have done that riff. I just think I always thought it's just one of those really 80s pump up in the air anthems, and you could put it in the subset with Simple Minds and U2, and look, it should have done a lot better in the charts, and I don't understand why. Rightio. Well, my number one is off what I think is their best album, Listen Like Thieves, and it's What You Need. So that was their big breakthrough in America. And funny enough, when they recorded this album, What You Need was the last song that they had recorded. So the producer says, there's no single, we need a single. So they all went back into the studio and they knocked up What You Need in one day. Wow. So it's a simple song. It's got some crunchy guitar riffs, and I think the three chords, dun 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 dun, I think that hooked the American audience because it had a bit of that rock crunch, and then you had a little bit of the funk swing, with the saxophone and that sort of funky rhythm. It's a perfect blend of rock and a bit of funk, and ever so catchy. Had a great video clip with that stop motion photography. I think Richard Laustein did the video. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, but it was so catchy as hell, and went to number 5. But that album, notice in the 80s they had a tendency with albums. They'd always do top load the album, all the singles in the first side. So the second side or the back end wouldn't have all the hits. And I'm just looking at this album. The first side, I played this last night, is basically all their singles. You had What You Need, Listen Like Thieves, that's another great song, Kiss the Dirt, Shine Like It Does, and then Good and Bad Times, which I don't think was a a single. And then the second side is Biting Bullets, this time Three Sisters Same Direction, One on One, and Red Red Sun. But, you know, they've just top loaded all the singles in that first side. And that used to
Except
be
for this time.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, Peter, your version of Listen Like Thieves, like I've got a Canadian version on Atlantic Records and it's a gatefold, but what label is your version on?
It's on WEA, which I know you've mentioned before is an offshoot. It's like a provisional
It's a
Australian
it's a Warner
offshoot.
company, and
Yeah,
Canada had that too because it stood for Warner Electra Atlantic. But
yeah.
I've also seen, and actually, I found the CD I have of Kick was used, and it's on Mercury Records, which I always find that strange when you have
Yeah,
albums that are released on different labels all over the world. Like I know AC/DC's albums are like that, and
yeah.
especially the early years. But yeah, yeah, What You Need. I mean, that was just it was the perfect song
Wow.
at the perfect time, and yeah, it was everywhere, and they were on their way. Yeah, you're right. It had the right mix of rock and pop and funk, and it had that great sax solo from Kirk
Mm,
Pengilly, and it had groove, and you could play it on pop stations, you could play it on rock stations, you know, you could play it in a rock club, you could play it at a dance club. They just had, you know, it just summed up everything that made them great.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's my number one. Just on the spot, have you got any honorable mentions that you want to just throw in the mix?
I do have a couple honorable mentions. I'll show the cassettes off now. Title song from Listen Like Thieves. Love this song, and this is an example of a song where it's kind of an example of where you wish that you could have just been in the studio and cranked those guitars up just a little. Like
Mm,
it's one of those songs that teeters on hard rock, and I love when they get
mm,
that little bit more guitar heavy.
yeah.
Yet that's not the kind of band that they are, but they come very very close on that. And I love the drum sound. Like the drums sound really cool on that song.
Mm,
Um, that was the follow up to What You Need. And I remember it only got to number 56. I remember hearing it on the radio for about 2 weeks and then I didn't hear it at all. And I remember wondering why, because it was a great song, but it wasn't until Kick, until they put the album out that had one song after another that radio just couldn't resist over here. But yeah, Listen Like Thieves is another one of my favorite songs by them. And the other one is a song that I've already mentioned. It's the opening track from Shabooh Shoobah, The One Thing. Great song, great attitude, great guitar riff. Um, you know, it was the perfect song to set the stage for, you know, 6 years later being one of the biggest bands in the world with the Kick album. And yeah, you know, Michael Hutchence is just in full control. The lyrics, I don't think he gets
mm,
enough credit for his lyrics. His lyrics aren't really as straightforward as you might think. There's always some sort of twists and turns.
absolutely.
And yeah, it's a great song. And funny thing about Shabooh Shoobah, this is the only known Inxs album to come out on 8-track. I have never heard of any of their other albums existing in 8-track form. No, I don't have it. It is highly collectible. I've only seen it exist as an American Columbia House version. And it's funny to me that there aren't more, because Atlantic Records were pretty good at putting their albums out by their artists on 8-track all the way through 85, 86. So I'm kind of surprised that the Swing and Listen Like Thieves don't exist. And they might, but
Yeah,
I've just never seen any evidence of it. But I have seen Shabooh Shoobah on 8-track. So so there you
yeah.
go. Those are 7 songs by NXS on another day. Well, I'd probably still put Don't Change as my number one, but another day, the other 6 might be different.
Absolutely. Just a quick question about the 8-track Shabooh Shoobah. What circulation do you think? How many would they have done? Just a guesstimate.
Well, this is one of the reasons I wanted to do my unspooled book, is really to try
Mm,
for this, because I have to imagine that they were pretty low pressings in that format, because by this time there weren't a lot of 8-tracks appearing in retail stores. And actually, I that kind of reminds me of something I do want to ask you. But so this would have been something that only someone that was a member of the Columbia House Record Club that had their format of choice still as 8-track would get. So, you know, if Shabooh Shoobah went gold in the States, that's 500,000 copies. I'd have to think that probably 300,000 of those would be cassettes, and maybe 100 would be vinyl, and 75,000 would be CDs, like in a very, very small would be the 8-track. So
Yeah.
I don't have a definitive answer for you, but I would like to ask, like, I've seen 8-tracks from Australia. I've seen like some of the early AC/DC ones. As far as popularity, do you remember 8-tracks?
No, not at all. Very minimal. I think it was a phenomenon probably up to the early 70s. But yeah, very, very little. And that's why, sort of your book is so interesting, and looking forward to getting a copy and perusing. But yeah, that sort of medium was very, no, didn't really sort of do much business in Australia.
That's one thing I've learned. I've talked to people from the UK as well, and they basically said, look, I remember seeing Beatles ones, but that's about it. And yeah, it was kind of primarily a North American phenomenon as far as having the popularity of them. Mostly in the 70s, that's when they peaked in popularity. And then the early 80s, they started to peter out of being made for retail. But yeah, it's just interesting. I know I've seen ones from Spain, from Argentina, but not very much. Not very much. I don't think I've ever seen any from Japan, for example. You see a few from the UK, but you never see like 80s ones. So
yeah, I do a lot of sort of vinyl digs, and so if I see any, I'll put a photo and I'll send it. I'll send it through to you. Put it on your website.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Finding the first album or Underneath the Colors on 8-track. That'd be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, my picks for honorable mentions is off the Swing album. So this is another one of my favorite albums. And I've always liked I Send a Message. That would go in my honorable mentions, and also the Swing. Yeah. So yeah, I like this album a lot. But it's really funny. I've gravitated more to the Listen Like Thieves album over the years, but the Swing, while I was a teenager growing up in Australia in the 80s, was definitely my favorite Inxs album of all time. But as I've got older, I've gravitated more to the crunch and the guitars and the raw funk of Listen Like Thieves.
I've heard that the Swing was a really, really big album there in Australia.
Huge, went to #1 and was there for quite some time. And another one is, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. This is Inxs 5, and this is a collection of their early songs, and Just Keep Walking is on this compilation. So that's one of my favorite. I always like the swagger of that. But another one I was just playing last night, and it's really very punkish, and I'll give you an honorable mention, is called Simple Simon. So our viewers, just check that out on video. That's a really crunchy little punkish type, very Inxs sounding song. So
I thought you were going to, when you said punky, I thought you were going to say We Are the Vegetables, because that's really punky too.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You could almost hear the Sex Pistols. We are the vegetables.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Simple Simon's got those funny keyboards in it too. Like, woo.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like I said, my friend Matt's a big Inxs fan, and he has the Inaccessive on vinyl and on CD. Not the easiest thing to find. It was never released. I don't think it was ever released outside of Australia.
Absolutely.
And that's another band. They're another band that has B-sides and non-album tracks galore. I mean, they could have filled albums out, with just their B-sides. And I got a long way to go before I got, catch up on.
Well, I think watch this space. I'm sure the Atlantic have got a fair amount in the vault. So we'll see how we go. Anyway, viewers, you tell me what what your top 5 songs are. Do you agree with our choices? Are there some, that we haven't covered? Please do so. Please subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tim, tell us about your website. Anything coming up with, invest?
Tim's Vinyl Confessions. You can find me on YouTube and all social media. And if you if you just want to type in timsvinylconfessions.com or timsvinylconfessions.ca, that'll take you. I don't have the website, but it'll take you right to my YouTube page. I just recently did that, so I have those domain names, so nobody else can use them. And I post every day. I post a different album every day. Usually, if it's a birthday or an anniversary of release date, and new video every weekend. And like we talked about, currently selling copies another run of my Unspooled and Adventure in 8 Tracks book. And thanks to everybody that supported it. And even if you're not one to collect 8 tracks, if you just like the idea of collecting music and reminiscing about music, you'll find something to like in this book. It's basically a journey, a journey through the 80s, kind of through my eyes, year by year. And it was a lot of fun putting it together.
Fantastic. And also you can see Tim and myself on the Contrarian Patreons. We're always doing some really interesting chats. I think we just did one last week on Aerosmith, which was a gas. So plenty of stuff coming up. Oh, thank you very much for your time. And we've got to do this again. It was a lot of fun.
Definitely a lot of fun. Thank you for having me
All
again,
right.
Peter.
See you guys. See ya.